All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to my Saturday virtual cooking class. We have a full house in Zoom, and hopefully, we have some friends joining us live on Facebook as well. My name is Erin. I am one of our dietitians as part of our amazing team. And today, I will be making dinner in a dash. So, if you happen to catch the dash all in capital letters, I am referring to the DASH diet, which I will explain in just a moment. But essentially, all of our recipes will be focusing on lower sodium dishes. And we'll be talking about how we can add flavor to our recipes and our dishes in a variety of ways without needing to add additional salt. So I promise nothing is lacking in flavor today, and it will all be heart healthy. So I'm very excited that everyone's joining me. Like I said, I have a full house in Zoom, so I'm so excited to be here with so many of our Unite for Her community, and I have one person cooking along with me, which is really exciting. So you're always welcome to cook along in the future, or you can just hang out with us for this hour. So with that being said, good morning from Houston, Texas, all across the United States. I love that early morning in Houston, and I feel like while it's probably very hot in Houston, it's very hot everywhere. So hopefully this will all cool us off if we're doing some entertaining this weekend. So if you have joined us for our cooking classes in the past, you know that the first thing that we do in starting off is share a food for thought moment. And what that is we highlight a different ingredient that we are featuring in our recipes. And wonderful, good job. We'll talk about that too, Faye, some low sodium ingredients. So my food for thought moment for today is all about capers. And before I share a little bit about capers, again, I want to give a quick thanks to our sponsor, Merck, who shares so much and supports so much of our education initiative, including our culinary effort with calling out these little nuggets of information. So before I jump into capers, I do want to share a little bit about the DASH diet. So many of us may have heard of the DASH diet, but we're not really familiar with what it is. So the DASH diet stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. So it is an acronym. And it is a diet that's promoted by the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, which is part of the NIH, the National Institutes of Health. And it was created several decades ago after researchers started to notice that high blood pressure was much less common in those that followed a plant-forward way of eating. So at that time, they were observing vegetarians and vegans. So they created this diet, and it's usually recommended for anyone that is looking to prevent or treat high blood pressure, or for those of us that may be at risk for heart disease. And interesting statistic, nearly 50% of US adults have high blood pressure, and most of them don't even know that they have it, which is why it's called a silent killer. So a lot of times we don't start to experience symptoms until it's really advanced or our blood pressure is very high, in which case, some medicinal measures need to be taken. And if you're looking for some good resource of information, of course, you can go to uniteforher.org, but the American Heart Association has a plethora of information. So you can go to heart.org for additional guidance on just overall heart health. So generally speaking, the DASH diet focuses on consuming fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and lean proteins. It's low in red meat, it's low in salt, added sugars, and it really highlights being low in saturated fat and trans fats while looking to increase potassium, magnesium, protein, fiber, all of those nutrients that support good blood pressure. And it's very well established that the link between blood pressure and cardiovascular disease is consistent and continuous, which means the evidence is there without a doubt. One is associated with the other. And what we always want to do, and I always say when I connect with our members, we always want to be thinking of our heart health. And then overall, from a sodium perspective, the DASH diet recommendation is to ingest no more than 3/4 of a teaspoon or 1,500 milligrams per day. That's not that much, and it adds up quite quickly. So this class will teach us how we can, from a culinary perspective, use and lean into a lot of different things to add flavor, like I said, without adding salt. So let's talk about capers, which I am using today, which you might be thinking, capers are really salty. Like, why is she including them? We'll talk about how we can lower the sodium and why I'm using just a little bit to add some punch. So capers, what you see here, so these little nuggets of taste and flavor, they're widely used as a seasoning and a garnish traditionally in Mediterranean cuisine. So they have a rich, tangy flavor. They are lemony. They have that salty taste, which means that for picky eaters, they can be a really great flavor profile. And because they pack such a punch with flavor, a little goes a long way. So even though they're usually pickled and brined, we are draining them and rinsing them and using them, which will, step one, immediately reduce the overall sodium. And we're using that little bit of brininess, that punch of briny flavor, to really add delicious flavor without like diving into all of this additional sodium. Now, capers are not to be confused with the caper berry, which is grown from the same plant, but it's larger, and caper berries may contain a seed. So you want to make sure that capers are picked early on. They are the early flower bud of the plant. If they continue to grow, they'll get larger, they'll get seeds, and they'll turn into a caper berry. So there's lots of different varieties out there, and the type of caper that you might see is based on size and region of the world from which it comes. So the smallest capers, which is what you see here and what I am using in my dish today, are grown in France, and they're called nonpareils. So you can see that on the label. You can find them in lots of different places. Usually the size is less than a quarter inch. They by far have the most flavor, but they tend to be more expensive. Slightly larger capers are what's called surfines, and they are among the most common varieties. So also for our chicken piccata today, you could substitute those as well. They would be wonderful in this dish. And then you've got really sizable capers, which are sometimes called capotes or capuchins. And so they're less hard to find. So you might just see them in a specialty store, or if you're traveling in the regions from which capers usually come from. So like I said, they are a wildly versatile ingredient from a culinary perspective. So you can add them to sandwiches, you can put them in salads or pasta dishes. You can use them very traditionally. They're known to be used in things like chicken piccata, which is what we're doing today. If you like bagels with cream cheese and lox and tomatoes and cucumbers, they're a great addition to that as well. But you can also be really creative with it. So maybe you're making some homemade pizza, you want to throw some capers for a salty touch on top. You can mix them into dips or dressings. You can swap them for pickles if you're making tuna salad or macaroni salad. So again, a little goes a long way to add that sort of briny flavor to it. Now, nutritionally, what area of the store shelf can I find capers? Oh, great question. So in the store, usually you would find them where other canned goods are. So I found these where there's other relishes and other pickled products. So that's usually where I found these, but you could always ask someone at your individual store, because for any of us that do grocery shopping, we know every store is different, but that's usually where they are. Sometimes they look like they're in a container like this. Sometimes they're in a taller, more narrow container. But when you look at them, they have this little briny berry. So nutritionally, they do offer us some benefits. So capers contain copper, which is an essential mineral that is involved in iron metabolism, energy function, and brain function. So we get a nice little copper boost there. And then it also provides a little bit of vitamin K, which we know is a micronutrient that our body needs for both blood clotting and bone health. Yeah, I love that. So that is our food for thought moment about capers. One last tip. So like I said, they are known to be salty because they're usually pickled and brined. So two things that you can do when you're working with a recipe that has capers, both of which we are doing today. So number one, you want to make sure that when you are using them, you're adjusting salt in the recipe overall. So likely if you're adding these to the recipe, you can cut back on salt that may be part of the ingredient list already. Maybe it's something that you're adding at the end once you taste and you feel like you need something. A, that's what we're doing. B, you can also rinse your capers, which will dramatically lower the sodium content as well. Again, that of which we're doing for our recipe today. So that is my food for thought moment, all about capers. I can't wait to use them for our chicken piccata. I will set them aside for now. Any questions on my shopping list later today? Nina, wonderful. Nina, I was going to ask about your green beans. So once I get to grilling our vegetables, I'm going to check in on your garden goodies that you picked yesterday. But let's jump into starting our chicken piccata. So Faye, I am going to cue you. So usually chicken piccata is, the chicken is sauteed, breaded and sauteed in the pan. Our healthy upgrade for this, number one, will be we're going to bread it and bake it in the oven. So my oven is preheated to 400 degrees. I have a baking sheet with some parchment here, and then we're going to make our breading. So again, with our chicken piccata, we are not adding any additional salt at all because we're relying on other flavors that we're using. I've got some pepper here. We'll be adding, of course, a ton of lemon and some other delicious flavors. So we'll rely on that. So first things first, I'm adding 1 cup of plain panko breadcrumbs. I love panko because they add a little bit more crunchiness when compared to a traditional breadcrumb. If you don't have panko in your pantry, please use a traditional breadcrumb. It's perfectly fine. Plain 1 cup. I am adding a 1/3 cup of grated Parmesan. Again, this is an ingredient that is known to have a higher salt content. So I am leaning into using a little bit of this on the breading because the quantity that will ultimately end up showing up is very little. So to me, I'm not really concerned as this being an ingredient that will add a ton of extra sodium to our dish. And then I've got a 1/4 teaspoon of some black pepper here. So I'm just using a fork. You can use a whisk, and we'll just get everything mixed together. I have some cooking spray here. I'm just going to move some things out of the way. I have some cooking spray here, so we'll spray our chicken before it goes in the oven. And what I am using is, move my knives out of the way. Okay. I have 2 chicken breasts here. They are thin chicken breasts. So if you have a traditional, they can be rather thick. I would pound them down or slice them in half. All right, so step 1, we're just going to dredge both sides in our breading. Very easy. And you can use your fork. I try to keep one hand dirty and one hand clean whenever I'm working with chicken or any type of animal proteins. So once everything is really well coated, you can use your fork to kind of just really get it to stick. And then once both sides are coated, we'll lay them down right on our baking sheet. Going to number 2, lay that right in. Really easy. And then, like I said, I will give this a quick spray with some cooking oil so that it crisps up really nicely. So oven is preheated, 400 degrees. I will start this at 15 minutes. I'll go over to my oven and give it a flip, and then we'll let that keep cooking until it's cooked through. Okay, let me move this aside. I will place this, actually I won't, not yet, little cooking spray. I'm using an avocado cooking spray because that's what I have. So if you have olive oil, that's fine. Perfect. Okay. Dirty hand will grab dirty dishes. Clean hand will grab chicken into the oven, and we'll let that bake. And then I will wash my hands before we move to grilling. So I placed my chicken on the middle rack, perfect, in my oven. I know you can't see, but that's where it is. Okay, excellent. So hands are washed. All right, moving on. So next recipe that we are starting is our grilled veggie orzo salad. I will be grilling my vegetables on a cast iron grill pan. You can use an outdoor grill. You can roast your vegetables in the oven. You can throw them under the broiler. You can use a flat bottom cast iron pan just to brown them, whatever you have. I am not adding any oil to my grill pan, but I am going to start to get it hot. So we're looking at medium high until it gets really warm. Okay, so I did make my orzo ahead of time. And so here's the start of it. You cook 1 1/4 cup of orzo. I had just a plain orzo in my pantry. A whole wheat would be fine, or a different type of smaller pasta. So I cooked that, and I'll show you tip number 1 on how we're going to start to add flavor to our dishes. But before that, you'll notice that I started this off with some cherry tomatoes, I should say. So let's cut the rest of our tomatoes here. So we're like tomato season. So I am using red cherry tomatoes. We're keeping these raw, so we're not going to cook them. These are a little bit more oblong, so I'm cutting them into quarters. But if you have smaller ones, cut them in half would be great. You could certainly use sun gold tomatoes, the beautiful yellow orange tomatoes that we typically see midway to the end of summer. They would be out of this world. And we're going to mix this with our orzo. I also have 1 clove of garlic that I am going to use my microplane and just grate right on in for a little bit of fresh garlic flavor. My last class, I always think, Sue says, good job, don't be a hero. Because it's always that last piece of the garlic that you try to grate that, you get your finger or something. So I know not to be a hero. Okay, so fresh garlic, tomatoes, orzo. Here's my little trick. My first way of inserting a ton of flavor, I'm using an infused olive oil. I added about a tablespoon. I have a rosemary infused olive oil in here. So beautiful, fresh, herby flavor. I love rosemary. So it's going to really start to enhance flavor from the get-go. And then we're going to grill our vegetables. We'll cut them up. We'll add them to this dish, and then we'll round it out. Really simple, really, really easy. Let's get to our vegetables. So I chopped some already. We've got a ton here. So I have some red onion that I'll end up just grilling and chopping. I'm going to finish a zucchini that I have and a yellow bell pepper. I already started some of the zucchini. We're going to cut it about 1/4 inch thick, and we're going to quarter. I have a red bell pepper here, so we're going to do the same for our yellow. So first, let's finish slicing our zucchini. This is the leftover of a ginormous zucchini from my parents' garden. If yours is a smaller diameter, that's okay. Use what you have. When I was first testing recipes for this cooking class, and I learned that you could grill a vegetable to go into a pasta salad, I thought, I will never not grill a vegetable for a pasta salad ever again, because it is so good. So I'm just cutting this into quarters. There we go. Throw the core out. We're using all of the pepper. So we're not going to go any smaller because I'm going to end up just grilling this like this. All right, so into our pan, into our pan. We'll do that. All right. Little bit of seasoning. We're going to get our hands dirty. I'm going to add just plain olive oil to this and a little bit of pepper. I am going to add a very little bit of salt. Not much. One interesting statistic regarding sodium intake and the adult population, a lot of times we think, we want to be mindful of sodium that we're using in cooking. Agreed, 100%. And usually whenever I'm working with a patient, whenever I'm connecting with our community members and we talk about how you can lower your sodium intake, my first suggestion is always moving salt off the table, right? Like not adding it at the table. But actually, where most of our sodium comes from in the American diet is not from salt we use during cooking or what we use in-house when we're making our own food. it's from highly processed foods that we're eating. So a lot of our convenience foods. So if you're looking to lower your salt intake, start to evaluate some of those common ultra processed foods that may be showing up and see if you can substitute them out for something that is a little less processed or something that is just more of a whole food. So interestingly enough, it really doesn't come from what we add to our recipes, although it's important to be mindful of that. Okay, so I used my hands, I oiled and greased my vegetables. Let me just wash my hands again. And then I am going to lay them right in the grill pan. Okay. My grill pan is hot. I love this. I have for those that were here during the firefighter episode, I have my vents going for good ventilation. And I'm just going to lay these down flat. So my peppers will lay down, zucchini. The oil that's on them will grill. Ah, thanks, Rachel. Look at us using technology. If you feel like your grill pan is getting a little hot, don't worry. You can turn it down a little bit. Cast iron holds heat really, really well. So we're going to let this go for a little bit. I have a fork here that I'll just go back and I'll flip over and we'll start looking for those grill marks. So you'll see me periodically just going back to my grill pan as we start to get those cooked. Okay, Faye, how are you doing? Doing okay? Thumbs up. I feel like no noise is good noise. Okay, we'll take that as an okay. All right, so we're just going to periodically grill those. Do I hear something?
Yeah, I said I'm doing fine.
Excellent. All right, excellent. Perfect. So we're going to hold tight there. We're just going to go back and do our grilling. That's the main part of this dish. Let's move on to starting our Tuscan white bean skillet. I love this dish. So what I'm using is a larger saute pot that has a higher lip and a lid. So for this, let me gather my ingredients. Also, this recipe comes together in no time at all. So the first thing that we'll be doing is I'm going to preheat my pan, not that one, to medium. So we'll get this warm, and I will warm 1 tablespoon of olive oil. So we'll get that warm inside. Perfect. And the first thing that will go in, what I have here is 1 medium diced onion. So this will go in first once our oil is hot. And then we've got a couple garlic cloves, and we have some sun-dried tomatoes. So this is where we're really leaning into other flavors other ingredients that can add a ton of flavor. So for this, sun-dried tomatoes, the garlic, the vegetable broth that we're using, I'll talk about low sodium versions. We've got some artichokes that we'll be using. So a lot of good stuff. So our onions go in and we're going to start to saute this for a few minutes. This looks good. Again, we're not adding any salt to this because we've got a ton of other really great ingredients that are packing a flavor punch. All right, let's check our veggies over here. I've got a 4. Ooh, we're starting to get grilly. Yeah, it looks great. So grilling, it's kind of like when we say roasting, it adds so much flavor. It just like changes the whole flavor profile of an ingredient. It's so good. Oops, there we go. That looks great. We'll let those go for a little longer. Okay. Flip our onion. Now, for your grilled vegetables and your orzo salad, you can use whatever you have on hand. So I was saying I was connected with Nina this week, and she was picking green beans from her garden. If you have fresh green beans, throw them on the grill. Give them a rough chop and throw it in. If you have a yellow zucchini instead, by all means use it. If you want to roast some broccoli and throw that in. So this is the time of year where we can really enjoy the flavors of the season. So really leverage that to what you have available and to what you like. So our onions saute, they look great. We'll let those go a little bit longer. Okay. Ooh, these look good. All right, let's put these guys in. Okay. All right, next ingredient. So I've got 2 cloves of garlic for my Tuscan white bean skillet. So again, I'm using my microplane. We'll grate this right in, really easy. You could mince it by hand. You can use a garlic press, all of which would be fine. So we'll grate this right in. Ooh. So as I was saying, when I was researching recipes for this, I happened to make this recipe because I was looking for something to do with kale, something different. And I love white beans, and I love even more a one-pot dish. And this really, it comes together so quickly. It's wild. So it's great for a weeknight. And it's got a ton of flavor. This is my favorite. All right, so we'll let that go for a second just to heat the garlic through, not too long. Looks great. Okay. And then let's add our sun-dried tomatoes. So I have half a cup sun-dried tomatoes that I pulled out of the oil, and these were actually already ground down, but if yours are the whole sun-dried tomatoes, just give them a chop. So all of those go in. And there is a little bit of residual oil here. Totally fine. Adds a ton of flavor. So we'll let this get warm and we'll start building. And you'll really get to see just how dirty my stovetop gets. So welcome to the behind the scenes. Okay, let's continue to grill. So these are great. We'll take these off and we'll just keep placing more veggies in. I love this. Great. Okay. While I'm doing this, Rachel, any questions that have come in or anyone that's watching on Facebook?
No questions yet. Nina was just saying that you mentioned that you use this, like you make this recipe for breakfast also.
Yes. So the Tuscan white bean skillet, right? She and I were talking. I personally prefer a more savory breakfast. I'm not really a sweet breakfast type of person. So what I have been doing is toasting up some really delicious hearty bread and heating up the Tuscan skillet in a little fry pan. You know, you don't need to add anything to it, just add your little fry pan and heating it and having it for breakfast. You want to talk about a recipe that will energize you. It's not heavy. You get fiber, you get protein. There's a ton of flavor to it. Oh my gosh, it's so good. It's a great way to start the day. So if that is something that kind of piques your interest as well, I would definitely recommend it because it is a great start to your day. We have 1 minute left on our oven. So let's add our next ingredient for our Tuscan skillet, which is we're going to deglaze the pan. I've got half a cup of vegetable broth here, low sodium. Let's talk about low sodium and what all of those really confusing labels mean on packages. Let me grab my low sodium broth. Okay, so what do you look for on a label? You want to look for something that says low sodium. What's the difference? I see reduced sodium. I see low sodium. I see no added salt. I'm like confused by what's on the label. So USDA guidelines for something to have a label on the front that says low sodium, it must contain 140 milligrams of sodium or less per serving. That makes something low sodium. If it is anything greater than that, it is not considered a heart-healthy low sodium food. Let me go check my chicken because my oven is beeping at me. And we'll see how we're doing. Oh, that looks good. Okay, I'm gonna flip it and I'll show you once we're done what this looks like. Oh, it looks great. All right. Okay. So I'm gonna put on another timer for 5 more minutes. Okay. So when something says reduced sodium, that means that there is just less sodium in it than its original counterpart. It does not mean it is a low sodium option. If something says no added salt, that is usually a heart healthy low sodium option because they're not adding any additional salt to it. Always worth checking the label. And then number 2, paying attention to the serving size. So remember, I said something to be low sodium. It's got to be 140 milligrams of sodium or less per serving. So this has 45 milligrams of sodium per 1 cup. It's a great option. So that's what you want to be looking for when you're moving through the grocery store. All right, so this looks great. We're deglazing. This looks wonderful. I'm going to flip my veggies and we'll keep adding and building. Ooh, see, this stuff really just comes together in no time at all. Oh, oh, oh. Now, if you really wanted to add a ton of flavor, again, I use the plain olive oil just to season my veggies here. I could certainly have used the rosemary infused or another type of favorite infused one. Come on, buddy. There we go. All right, let them cook. Okay. Next on our dish, we're adding our beans. Ooh, let me uncover those. So let me grab the rest of our ingredients. So essentially, the rest just goes in the pan and it continues to cook down. So what do we have? I've got 2 cans of Great Northern or cannellini beans here, rinsed. So this is where you also want to see an option on the can that says no added salt or low sodium. A, that would be a great option. B, you do want to make sure that you're rinsing it. Our beans are usually in a solution of salt and starch. So as we're rinsing it really well, we're again immediately lowering the sodium content. So our beans go in, along with, we've got some marinated artichokes here. So again, took these out of the marinade, gave them a quick rinse and a chop, ton of flavor, but we've immediately reduced the sodium that may have been in for the marinade. So again, we're like really leaning into the flavors that are naturally part of this to make a really delicious dish. So those can go in, looking good. Okay. And then we've got fire roasted tomatoes. I've got 1 can diced fire roasted tomatoes. If you don't have fire roasted, use plain diced tomatoes, that would be fine. If you have tomatoes in your garden, use them because they're probably out of this world delicious, super full of flavor. It's a great way to use up some of these summer tomatoes. And then finally, I have 1 tablespoon of an Italian seasoning blend. So this is just a plain Italian seasoning blend, no added salt, but has all of those Italian flavors that we love, right? Oregano, parsley, basil, rosemary, thyme, just, you know, dried garlic. So all of that good stuff. So now let's give this a mix. And we'll just start to let this cook. Our last step with this is adding the kale in. So we'll add that at the very end, let it cook down and wilt, and then we'll serve. So again, this is like easy peasy. I love this recipe. We've got 1 minute on the chicken, so we'll check that out in a little bit. So I am just gonna let this, I'm gonna just let that cook. We'll let that go. All right, let's check our veggies. We're coming along. Take these off, and I'll do 1 more round of grilling as we get our chicken out of the oven, and we'll start our piccata sauce. So this looks great. So while I'm doing this, I'm going to shamelessly plug our virtual hangouts that we have coming up. in August because we're doing a summer book series. So we're bringing it back. And I'm sharing because I am literally so thrilled about this. We have two incredible books that we are reading, one of which has been around for a really long time. Anti-Cancer Living. That's my chicken. So I'll go check on that in a minute. And we're having both authors on with us. Our virtual hangout for that is August 7th. And then we have a new book that came out earlier this spring, Healing in Cancer, from a physician, I believe that's based out in New Jersey. And we're going to have Dr. Wayne Jonas on with us. So, I mean, talk about what an exciting summer to have to do some summer reading. If you are looking for an audiobook, I've been listening to Anti-Cancer Living. It comes in audiobook. We're just so thrilled. So August 7th and August 21st, we've got our summer book series. So we're just so excited. So hopefully you'll join us for that. Okay, that one's great. Yeah, I will listen as I take the chicken out.
Sounds good. Ruby was asking if you could substitute beets for tomatoes if tomatoes are too acidic.
You could certainly try it. I'll be perfectly honest, I have not. Here's what I may do. I'm going to let that go for another minute. Here's what I may do. Do a broth, add your vegetable broth. I might add, when you add your broth to deglaze it, I might use a little bit of tomato paste to give that red color, a little bit of the tomato flavor, but not all of the acidity. So I would probably start with 1 tablespoon of a plain tomato paste, let that cook with the broth, and then you can start to add your other ingredients on top. So that's what I would probably do. Great question. All right. Oh my gosh, this looks great. All right, let me go grab my chicken and I'll show you what that looks like. Rocking and rolling over here. All right. Let's see. Yeah. Yep. Okay, good. Just make sure we're cooked all the way through. All right, so we've got nice little browning going on. Now, if I had a meat thermometer and I would test this, food safety, cooking temperature is 165 for chicken. So you want to make sure that it cooks to that temperature. I'm just going to set it over here on my counter to stay warm. Okay. All right. Let's just make sure. I'm going to turn that down just a little bit. This looks great. Okay. And then, before we start our piccata, let me check in with Faye, see how you're doing, see how you're coming along. Can I use those? Linda, absolutely. Marinated artichoke hearts and dehydrated sun gold tomatoes from last year. Absolutely. Dehydrated sun gold tomatoes, try rehydrating again in a little bit of that vegetable broth, just to give them flavor and plump them up a little bit and then add them in. It's a great suggestion. And I love that you're using stuff from last summer. What a great preservative to really use all the amazing produce. So I love that suggestion. Okay. So before we go to our chicken piccata, let's add our kale. So if you are not a fan of kale, you will be. I promise. You will be after this. And I love this because kale is so hearty that you can cook this as long as you want. Just cook it down. So the recipe calls for 7 or 8 minutes. Oh my gosh, if you forgot about it and let it go, now the volunteer sun golds are coming in. I know the sun golds this year. Just cook this down. So I have some curly leaf kale here that I removed from the stem. I gave it a rough chop, but you do want it to be in pieces so that it's not falling off my toast when I eat it in the morning. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to start by adding it in. We'll stir it a little bit. And I will put a lid on it. So I'm just going to try to get it mixed a little bit. And I'm going to just pop a lid on it to let it steam a little bit, okay? All right, let's flip our veggies and then start our piccata sauce. Turn that up a little bit. That looks great. That looks great. Oh, I love this. If you are barbecuing or you're going to, a party, this grilled orzo pasta dish is great to make ahead of time. And I'll show you what I would do up until, like the steps that I would do up until the day before, and then how you can dress it before you go to your party. So we'll just let those finish. Okay. So let's make a delicious lemon piccata sauce. Okay. So we need a large saute pan. So I have a large saute. I'm using a non-stick. You could use, I've made this with stainless steel would be fine as well. You could use this in cast iron also, so that would be great. Yeah, actually, Joanne, absolutely. You could use a bit of the baking soda to try to neutralize that a little bit for the tomatoes if you wanted to give that a go as well. So for our sauce, we're going to start by getting our pan hot. I am going to suggest starting on a lower heat and going up from there. And here's why. First, we're going to add a little bit of olive oil to this. We'll let that get warm. And then we're going to start by adding some 4 cloves of fresh garlic. And what we don't want is to burn it, because there is no coming back from burnt garlic. And I have burnt a lot of garlic in my time. So I've got 4 cloves here. I'll use my microplane. And what we'll let that do is, bring this up on heat just a little bit. What we'll let that do is just sort of let the garlic infuse with the oil before we start adding the other flavors. But again, I like a medium low sort of heat to just make sure it's not getting too hot, but we're getting all of that great flavor. So let me start to grate our garlic right into here. And again, we're not going to be a hero and get our fingertips on the microplane. Oh, I have to laugh every time I do this. I'm like, nope, 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 stop. Ooh. If you wanted to, if you didn't have fresh garlic, I think adding a little bit of garlic powder would probably be fine. And you can also use less garlic. So I know that this is a lot for some of us. So if this is like too much, that's okay. All right, so let's let this infuse. We're gonna let it get warm. We'll start to smell our garlic. I'll turn this up just a tad, but I'm watching closely. And we'll let that get warm. Okay, move this out of the way. That out of the way. Great. Good, let's check our kale. Make sure the lid is not hot. So this little bit of steaming, look at that. Bright green, beautiful steam, beautiful. So let's add more, right? This is also another dish where you can really add a lot. So I'm gonna add the rest in my pan. And we'll give this a little stir, and then we're practically done. Okay. And I will I'll cover this and I'll let it keep cooking. It's great. All right, next on our list, add a little garlic. We are gonna add a little bit of butter, unsalted butter, right? So this is a little bit more of a decadent dish in that we are using some butter, but it is unsalted. It's a great way to control our salt, frankly. So we'll let this, I'm gonna turn that down. I can start to see some of my garlic is crisping, right? So I really wanna be careful that we're not getting too hot too soon. So really just pay attention to that. Here's the rest of my ingredients. I've got my capers. I've got some low sodium chicken stock, 3/4 of a cup. And we're gonna use this and we'll let this kind of cook down. That looks great, all right. Let's add our chicken broth. So you could use chicken broth. I believe the recipe also says you could use white wine if you want, and just it would cook. We're going to end up boiling this for several minutes. So you would cook the alcohol out, but chicken broth I think is really full of flavor. So we're adding that. And We'll give it a mix, and we're turning up our heat because we're going to bring this up to a boil and we'll let it reduce a little bit. This looks great.
In the chat, Erin.
Yeah.
How you suggest reheating the bean dish?
I use a fry pan. I use a saute pan in the morning on like low, medium heat, and like a smaller version of this pan. That's how I reheat it, and it's absolutely perfect. You don't have to add anything additional to it. I don't add any oil or anything to my pan because it's got that as part of the ingredients, so it reheats beautifully. I mean, I was looking forward to this class for so many reasons, but mostly because I need breakfast tomorrow, and so I will have it. So it is really delicious. Okay, also to our broth, let's add some lemon juice. So it calls for about a quarter cup. We'll see how much comes out of here. Sometimes a quarter cup is half. I think I'm gonna add the whole juice of the whole lemon to really give that punch of flavor. Yeah, great. All right, and I'm gonna turn my grill pan off. Make sure that that's centered. That looks great. And we're just gonna let this reduce. So we'll let that go. Once it reduces, we'll add our capers. No, actually, we're gonna add them now. Sorry, there we go. And now we'll let all of the flavors get combined, cook together, and thicken. And then we may add a little bit more butter at the end. May. Total discretion. So I'm just gonna keep watching that. Okay. Perfect. So let's get our vegetables. Let's finish our orzo. We can serve because our Tuscan skillet will be done, and then we'll plate our piccata. So how we're doing on time? We're doing great on time. All right. Grab our veggies. They look great. Now, for these dishes, let's think about how long they will last, right? So your orzo and your Tuscan kale, easy 4 to 5 days. We're not adding any dairy. There's no cream to it. So you can reheat it. It can live in an airtight container, stored properly in your fridge for a while. Let's just be careful here. We'll let that cool down. Okay. All right. So here, we're just going to chop up our vegetables and add them to our big bowl. So let me just clear a little space here. And then we're just going to start chopping. Let me get my scraper. Okay. And so what we're shooting for, my peppers I'll cut into strips, and then we'll cut into little bite-sized pieces. Same thing with the zucchini. We'll slice. Generally speaking, you want to try to have things the same size for continuity's sake. Let's layer our zucchini so we get through them. All right. Let's check all right, we're looking good. This looks good, we're getting there. All those flavors. Okay, we will finish that dish, our chicken piccata, with some fresh parsley. For our orzo salad, we're gonna finish it with some fresh basil and some red wine vinegar. So our next tip for adding flavor is leaning in to acids. So we're using, for our orzo dish, I'll be adding some red wine vinegar at the end. So acid really helps to bring out flavor. In our chicken piccata, we use lemon juice. So adding any type of vinegar for this dish, a white wine, red wine, apple cider would be wonderful. And so acid, the other benefit of something like a vinegar is the flavor profile is very reminiscent of salt. And so it almost gives the impression of adding saltiness, but without all of the sodium. So leveraging different types of vinegars to add flavor is a great way. Finally, chop a red onion. Oh my gosh. And if you are not a raw onion fan, grilling it, so good. So good. All right, our broth looks good. Just want to keep some eyes on this. I love this. All right. So in making this pasta dish ahead of time, what I would do is everything up to this, everything including this step, chopping all the veggies. So making the orzo, tomatoes, garlic, grilling your vegetables, prepping them, getting everything combined. And at that point, I would stop. And I would add your vinegar and your fresh basil before you leave to go to wherever you're having this dish. Just do that right before you're ready to serve as like a final. Great. All right, let's see how we're doing here. Oh, we're starting to get thick. This is great. I'm going to turn my heat down here. We're starting to get a little brown. And so what I'm noticing is when I move my spatula across, my liquid does not come together right away. So this actually looks really great. I just turned my heat down because I don't want it to get a little too hot. And I'm going to let this go for just a little while longer, and we are practically ready. This looks great. Okay, I'm going to take a pause. Let's check our Tuscan kale. Beautiful. Okay. I'm also just going to throw some bread on my hot pan over here to toast it. That's the beauty. Okay, this looks great and well combined. I'll turn my pan off here. And again, I could add a ton more kale to this. So use what you have. Do not be afraid to overload this because as with any green, it cooks down. And feel free to forget about it. You forget about it, it sits here, it cooks, it's okay, it just gets better. It only gets better. All right, so that is practically done. This looks great. Turn that off heat, we'll toast our bread. Okay, let's finish chopping veggies. I'm almost done. And then we will get everything assembled. Oops. Be careful, these little slippery suckers with our onions, they kind of come apart. So just be careful as you're cutting them. Take your time. The last thing we need is, a knife situation. Okay, any other questions as we're sort of finalizing, wrapping and assembling everything for our dishes? Any questions? And I should say, actually, before we go to that, I should say, listen, Michelle and I are both cooking for July and August. And Michelle is highlighting another well-studied, well-established, healthy way of eating, which is the Mediterranean diet. So she is making some really flavorful dishes using spices that, we may not use all the time. So I highly, highly recommend jumping in with her cooking class because what she is using and what she's calling out is just more ways to add flavor to your dishes, right? Really great flavor. Okay, this looks great. Finish those. Okay. So here's what we have. It looks great. Beautiful color, right? So we'll get everything. Look, talk about eating the rainbow. I love this. All right, I am going to add some fresh black pepper. A little more.
One question, Erin. Marta was just asking how you sharpen your knives.
Oh, great question. Oh, gosh, how do I sharpen them? Well, I've tried the whetstone, like an actual whetstone. I'm going to finish this. I'm adding a little drizzle of olive oil. This is 2 tablespoons here. I will not use 2 tablespoons. Just going to add a little drizzle. So I actually invested in an electric knife sharpener that I can use for my type of knives. So every few months, I will use my electric knife sharpener, and I'll do that. And then aside from that, more regularly, I use the honing stick that comes with it. And I'll grab it once I go grab my my chicken over there and I plate that. And so the honing stick that you typically see in your knife block is not meant to sharpen your knife. It is really meant to straighten the edge. So that can help with a cleaner cut. And that is something that I use almost every time before I use it. I'll show you what that looks like. So now you can also go to a kitchen store, go to a knife store, and have them professionally sharpened, which if you do a lot of cooking and you've invested in good knives, once a year, a professional knife sharpening is absolutely worth it. The kitchen store that I would take mine to, which has closed sadly, but that kitchen store would charge me $5 a knife. So for me, it was really a wonderful investment to help keep them nice and sharp. Because a sharp knife is a safe knife. A dull knife is not a safe knife. Okay, so this looks amazing. We'll get that plated in a second. Let's get everything else together too. So let me grab my chicken and my honing knife, or my honing stick. All right. Ooh. Okay. So, that in a second. Okay. All right, chicken. Yowza. All right. And then we will dress. So we've got this beautiful, oh my gosh, so good. Okay. Now, I didn't add, like I said, we could add a little extra butter if we wanted to be decadent, but you know what? I don't really think it needs it. So I just want to drizzle on top. Ooh, yeah, that looks good. Oh my gosh. And then we're going to finish this with some fresh parsley. Fresh herbs make all the difference. So again, I highly encourage perhaps potting your own herbs. You know, start with the one that you use often. If you love parsley, it's super versatile, grow some parsley. Or if you love basil, do that. So good. We're going to finish this with some fresh parsley. Oh my gosh, so good. Chicken piccata. So good. All right, we'll cut into that in a minute. Love. Set this aside. All right, let's grab our toasty bread. It's warm and kind of crispy. We'll get that. So here, Nina, this is for you. So this you are watching my breakfast. This is what I have for breakfast. Oh, I just heated. Of course, I don't have this much, but love this. And I'm actually going to get a smaller knife or a smaller spoon. And you can cut these in half. I just drizzle it on. It's so good. With some toasty bread, if you want to grab a garlic clove and rub a raw garlic clove to make your homemade garlic bread, you can totally do that as well. Oh my gosh, but this is like out of this world. It's filling, it's not heavy, it's super delicious. It's so good, so good. So we've got our beautiful Tuscan white bean skillet with kale. Love this. And then let's plate our orzo salad. Oh my gosh, this looks so good. A little in here. All right, Faye, as I'm doing this, how you doing? How's everything coming along? How do your dishes look, taste? I'll give you a minute.
So Erin, I'm still cutting my veggies. I always seem to get behind no matter how much prepping I do ahead of time.
That's okay.
I also posted in the chat a picture of my plate from Michelle's class that I did 2 weeks ago on the Mediterranean.
Yes. Oop, did I lose you? Rachel, did we lose sound?
Hold on, let me. No, Faye's still unmuted. I think
Oh,
maybe
okay.
just internet lagged
Ooh.
out.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, am I there now?
Yes.
Okay. So did you hear that? I posted the picture of Michelle's dish from my class that I did with her 2 weeks ago in the chat. And usually I just cook for me and my husband, but I invited my sister and I invited her today too. And
Good.
they loved everything. My husband's only regret was that I didn't make more of it so that we had more leftovers, especially the chicken dish.
Good. That is a good problem to have, Faye. So
And
I love that.
today's looks wonderful too. I haven't put the plates together yet because I'm still working on the piccata
Good.
sauce. But I'll send
Hey,
you
that's okay. Definitely send them along. We love that. So we've got our beautiful grilled. I mean, this is just visually stunning. So this looks great. We've got and Linda, you absolutely could poach an egg on this. If you have a poached egg that you top this with, absolute perfection. Like, talk about a fancy sort of breakfast brunch dish that really doesn't take much time, but is like so wildly filling and flavorful. So we love that. And then we've got beautiful chicken piccata. Listen, all low sodium, all heart healthy, great sources of fiber, lean protein, low saturated fat. I know we added a little bit of butter to this, but 1 tablespoon for a sauce and we reduce. So really minimal, especially when you're pairing it with lots of other healthy things. So that is our dinner in a dash, maybe breakfast in a dash cooking class. Any questions about the recipes or ingredients or substitutions? Any other questions or inquiries? Okay. Wonderful. Love the new camera view. Excellent. We are so excited. And listen, thanks to Rachel, my wonderful co-host, that not only is like a rock star on our digital team, she does so much for our education platform, our social media, and I am thrilled to have her with me. So I'm glad you liked the second view. Hopefully that was more helpful visually with as you're cooking to make sure things kind of look in the vein that they should. I know that that can be a little bit elusive. So hopefully that was helpful. Look for more camera views, that we're trying to always improve and upgrade what the content and information that we bring to you. So I'm glad you enjoyed. We have all of the recipes in our Food for Thought. So if you go to uniteforher.org /food for thought, you can get Michelle's recipes, you can get my recipes. You can sign up for Michelle's class if you haven't joined already. Like Faye said, the recipes are out of this world. So hopefully you will try these on your own. Nina, if you use your green beans, let me know what you think. Certainly reach out if you have any questions, but I really appreciate you being here with me today. I hope you had a wonderful time watching. Hopefully even more, you will make these on your own. Let us know what you think, good, bad, and different. And also let us know some ideas of what you're thinking of or what you'd like to see moving forward. We're always taking suggestions for recipes and class themes, you know, that you would be of interest to. Good. Yeah, so let us know what you think. Everybody enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Thank you so much for being here. If you watched along on Facebook, thank you so much for tuning in. And hopefully we will see you again in our virtual kitchen. Have a great day, everyone.